Happy Friday. Those claps are waking me up a little bit. It's Kevin Kenny. This is a new edition of the Build series live in New York City. And our guest today had quite the 2018. Scored themselves a #1 hit at radio. Also scored a top 20 hit on the alternative charts and head into this year on tour here in New York City with over 2 million monthly Spotify listeners. Please let's give a warm Build welcome to Mount Joy.
Thanks for having me.
If it's just you, it's still Mount Joy, though, right? Do you just sort of like embody all that is Mount Joy?
Yeah, it's a representative democracy, so I represent the whole crew here today.
I like it. Well, thanks for stopping by, Matt. You got 2 sold-out shows here in New York City, which probably deserves another round of applause, guys. That's pretty cool. This is, I mean, it's seemingly, from, you know, a vantage point like mine, happening very quickly. But you've probably been working on music for quite some time.
Yeah, it kind of started, Sam and I grew up in the Philadelphia area playing music kind of all our lives, and I guess briefly gave up on it to chase jobs that actually kind of paid the rent, and then just kind of right when that happened, we were out in Los Angeles working separate jobs, and had the song Astrovan kind of go viral on Spotify, and quit those jobs.
Right. I've heard you say you grew up around Philadelphia. Now I'm from northern New Jersey. So when you say around Philly, are you on the Pennsylvania side or are you on the Jersey side?
Yeah, the Pennsylvania side.
Okay, you are. And you guys knew each other in high school, right? And you were kind of like messing around with music, but I understand it wasn't until years later that you finally kind of got together. What brought you two back together in the form of this?
I think like a collective real disdain for our day jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were those days? So I'm trying to get. There's so much to talk to you about. I'm trying to get the sort of the timeline right. Did the song go viral and then you moved out to LA to get these jobs, or were you already in LA with these jobs?
Yeah. So we were already in LA. Just
okay.
I followed my girlfriend after college out there and was working a job out there, completely unrelated to music or even the pursuit of music. Just found my way out there, and then it wasn't until later that the Mount Joy thing started.
I love that story because I think a lot of young musicians, they'll look at a band like yours and they'll say, oh, move to LA, and you're just like immediately going to go viral. But you moved out to LA, and you know, it's sort of the reality of trying to be a musician is it's great, you can do the gigs at night, but during the day, you got to get a job like the rest of us, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think in some way it wasn't even until we sort of, at least for me, kind of gave up on the idea that I was going to keep pushing and definitely be a musician, and I was working in Boston, which is where I went to school, at a restaurant and trying to make music on the side, and I think that's a pretty popular thing for artists to be doing, but I sort of was like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this, but I'm going to try to push my professional life in a more stable direction, and it wasn't until I did that I think I started having success in music.
Yeah. You went to school in Boston?
Mm-hmm.
Whereabouts?
Northeastern University.
Okay. You know what's funny about Boston, really quick, is I was just talking about Boston as a music city this week, and I feel like it's such a great college town for a young musician. You got Berkeley up there. You got so many colleges up there, right? Northeastern, as you just said. Mm-hmm. But I don't think a lot of bands come out of Boston. Like, why is that? You got Aerosmith, you got like the Lemonheads, maybe the Pixies came out of Boston, but like, there's not like a huge... I don't think of Boston as a musical city, but then you think about all those young people playing music in college. What was it like for you?
Yeah, I think part of that might be that it's a pretty small city. I think it gets a lot of attention culturally in America, which makes it seem much larger than it is. But I think there's only like 500,000 people or something like that in Boston proper. I mean, it's got a bigger metro area, but I think, you know, a city like New York, Los Angeles, even Philadelphia, the scale of the city is so much bigger. So there's just more opportunity, I think.
So you bounced around a little bit, but your real influences, I understand, are actually back in like the 60s and the 70s. What was it about that rock music, blues music of, folk music even of back then that you really gravitated towards?
I think it's just what I grew up with. My dad is a big connoisseur of all of that music, and sort of, you know, I just kind of remember always waking up on the weekends and going downstairs and always had the stereo system playing that music and jazz and yeah, just a lot of like, that was when he grew up, so it was kind of the music of his generation. And I don't know, I never had that moment where I was like, oh, I'm going to, you know, listen to the new things that my parents hate, you know, all that sort of cliche teenage stuff. I always sort of stuck with, you know, kept diving deeper into that generation's music.
And was that a gateway to maybe like the fashion of that generation or the culture of that generation? I'm always curious, you know, when you have these sort of vintage tastes, was it just the sonics of it, or was it sort of the time? Is there nostalgia to it?
Yeah, I think too. I think like, for example, living out in Los Angeles now, like I get this sort of like I don't know, like we're driving up Laurel Canyon and I'm sort of like, wow, like what was this like in the 70s? I don't know. I have this sort of, I don't know where it comes from because I wasn't alive in the 70s, but I have this sort of nostalgia for the 70s despite having never been there. I have no idea why.
Right. Do you believe in like past lives? Maybe you were like some rock star in the 70s, right?
That would be, I feel like that would be living my best life. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Who are some of your favorite artists from the 1970s while we're on the topic?
I think a big kind of, I don't know, Neil Young, Paul Simon, Grateful Dead, but even just like, I don't know, like I love the Staples singers. I love all kinds of stuff. Marvin Gaye. I feel like there was just such a focus on really good soulful music that sort of, not that it doesn't exist today, but I think it's just harder for me to pinpoint that today.
Where do you think we're headed in terms of music? Because you talk about like the soulfulness of music, and I just think the world, of course, has increasingly become very fast. You know, not just, it's not a new thing. It's just over time, everything's speeding up, right? Now music is just like here today, gone tomorrow. Where do you think music's headed though with that sort of speed?
I think if I knew, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I try not to like focus on the where it should be headed or whatever, and just really try to focus on what it is that I love to make and try to improve on that as much as I can. But I think with, all the streaming changes to the way that music is consumed, I think there's more opportunity. I think in some ways there's never been a time where it's, easier to get your music heard in terms of, the audience is one click away kind of thing, whereas before it was, you've got to record your songs to tape and then press them to vinyl and try to get people to buy that and hear that. So I think now maybe it's easier and therefore you have more access to different kinds of music would be my best answer. I don't know.
Definitely. Are you influenced by any of that music that we now have access to?
I think so. I mean, I think I always try to like occasionally throw on the radio just so that I'm not like completely lost as to what's happening.
And hear your song.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of really cool stuff happening right now in hip hop and R&B space. I think like right now it's pretty clear to me that that's like the cultural center of music right now, and I think there's some really cool stuff coming out of that. So,
I mean, my theory, we've talked about it a lot on the show with various guests, is that the reason why hip hop and even R&B are exploding right now is I think it's the genre with the least amount of rules and the least amount of constructs, right? Of like what hip hop is, right? Hip hop can be anything. You come from the world of, I've heard you've been described in so many different ways, whether it's alternative or folk. How would you describe yourself first of all?
I just like to think of myself as a songwriter.
Okay.
I think, because you call yourself like folk rock. I think that like puts it in a pretty easy box to what we sound like on the first record. But
right.
Always would love to be able to make something and not feel like it's like a different sound, but just feel like it was what we were inspired by or whatever it was that day.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is, are there any constructs or rules that you feel like from the world of music you come from?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a, I guess specifically with, some of the hip hop, R&B, electronic music now, there's like laptops involved and headphones on stage, and it's sort of separated from this level of live musicianship and not as many effects or things sort of holding you up there. I think sometimes maybe people in our space are sort of like frowning upon using tracks and things like that, and looking for more like, standard musicianship on stage, I guess. So I guess you could say we feel constrained by that, but I really don't. I don't feel any one way or the other about bands that use tracks. I just think as long as you're making what it is you set out to make and you're proud of it and people are responding to it, then that's the point of music for me.
Totally. Now, how do you sort of decide when and when not to incorporate technology into your music?
I think when the five of us are in the room and we're just trying to capture whether it's a certain vibe or whatever it is, and if it feels like it's outside of our spirit, that whatever it is that we're trying to do, then we kind of laugh at ourselves for a second and say, okay, never mind, no 808 here. But I think it'd be silly to not allow yourself to experiment with what's available.
Yeah, no, that's a great mindset. Well, take me back to Astrovan really quick and just kind of explain how this thing blew up, because what I understand is you put it up online and within its first month it had like 1 million streams on Spotify. Did you just get like a really important like playlist placement, or like what made it go so viral?
I think, yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact playlist, but I remember at the time I really didn't know anything about Spotify playlisting or what it all meant. And I remember our manager, who's here today, I was on the phone with him, and he was like, Spotify really likes the track. I was at working like a legal services job out at lunch, like walking around in the parking lot. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. He's like, they're going to put it on a playlist. And I was like, wow. I mean, all I could think about was like, I don't know. I didn't even know what a playlist was. So I was like, wow, that's great. And he seemed more excited than I was, I guess. So I was like, all right. And I did a little research, but I forget which one it was. But the fact was that they gave us like the first slot, which was huge. And I think people responded to it. And yeah, it was amazing.
So funny you talk about that first slot because it's almost been like that's like a radio spin these days. I mean, radio, of course, not taking anything away from it, but yeah, it's like funny how just like that first song on a given popular playlist is just so powerful. I mean, it really can just blow you up. What was the biggest change you saw in your personal life after the song did so well?
I think it's kind of been a longer term or longer period like change in personal life, just since ultimately that led to us touring, and it's just. To go from working a job that's however many miles from your house to working a job that's really traveling all around the world, it puts strains on relationships, and you have to make some tough choices about stuff like that. So I would say that's the biggest change, is just sort of deciding, like, do you want to do music and have, your dream of being a musician come true, or do you want to, make sure that all the relationships you've worked so hard to keep for so long are taken care of. So there's definitely like, I would say that's the biggest immediate change in your life.
Makes me think of that John Mayer song, Dear Marie. You ever hear that one?
I don't know if I've heard that one.
Oh, it's great. It's just about how, well, like he's got the road and then this girl's back home. But yeah, it's a great song, Dear Marie by John Mayer. He's talking about decisions and tough ones to make in your career and in your life. A lot of young musicians are in similar situations as you were, where they have a normal job. It's maybe a good paying job. Their music is kind of taken off, but they don't know when is the moment to quit that job, leave that profession, and go 100% towards the music. Can you offer any insight or maybe tell that story from your own experience?
Yeah, I think for me it was just, just thinking about what it would be like if I didn't do it, if I didn't take the chance and be a musician, that I felt like personally I'd always regret it. And I think it's definitely a legitimate decision to make either way, because it's not easy to travel all around and risk health and obviously relationships and everything like that. But I think as long as it's what you truly, truly want to do, it's totally worth it, and it's amazingly rewarding, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Yeah. Do you ever think about, while you're having the success, like what is it about your music that is connecting with so many fans?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to say, but I like to think that, because it's true, I like to think that it's just because the songs came from an honest place, and that people can connect with, whether it's lyrics or, choices with arrangements, that just people making honest choices about how to express an emotion or a story or something like that. And as far as I can tell, that's the only thing we did that I don't know that I can really put my finger on.
Right. I mean, it's certainly connecting people in a pretty impactful way. You got to tell this story. I know you've told it before, but a couple actually got engaged at one of your concerts. It was like a festival. Please just tell us this whole story. This is wild.
Yeah, so pretty early on, actually, we played, it was Shaky Knees in Atlanta, and we got a heads up the day before that someone was asking our management if it would be okay if they came on stage and asked his, I guess now, wife to marry him. And we were super excited, because I think stuff like that is it's one thing to play songs, but it's another thing to have someone do something. I was kind of hoping either way it would be good kind of thing. Because she says, no, that's amazing, that's hilarious. And obviously, especially since we were thinking okay, if they say no, we'll play Dirty Love right afterwards. And we had it all set up, and then she said yes, but it was a cool experience. I kept feeling like we were going to get punked, like there was going to be a whole situation in a brawl or something like that, but it was good.
That's awesome. Were they big fans of like a particular song? Like, did they have any requests, or they just wanted to do it at the Mount Joy show?
Honestly, it was like, in that way, it was mildly disappointing. It was like, they came on, it was like, oh, God, I hope this works for you, man. And then he asked her to marry him. She said yes. They waved, and they just walked off, and I never saw them again. So.
Wait, so was it supposed to be a surprise for her? Like, what did she think was happening? Like, he brought her out on stage before you guys were about to play.
Yeah, you're asking the right questions.
Right.
I don't know if I know that it wasn't completely rigged, but I feel like she obviously knew something was up. Maybe she just thought they were going to give some sort of State of the Union address to the crowd or something. I don't know.
What are we doing up here?
I don't know.
A ring. Speaking of shows, you've done some really cool tours and gigs that I wanted to ask you about. You opened for Weezer, I read. Mm-hmm. Was this in Philadelphia?
Yep.
So that's pretty rad, man. Hometown, I don't know if you're a Weezer guy or not, but like Weezer in your hometown, that must be cool.
It was really cool. It was right around Christmas time, and it was one of the first shows in Philadelphia. They just opened this the Met there in Philadelphia, and it was one of the first shows there. And it's a beautiful new venue that they kind of renovated. It was an old opera house, and they've renovated it. And it was cool to be from there and play one of the first shows there. And of course with Weezer, who I grew up listening to, and yeah, so it was really cool.
That is cool. And then toured with the Shins as well.
Yeah, we played an after show with the Shins after Lollapalooza, and again, that was the same type of situation. It was at I think the Vic Theater in Chicago, which is a beautiful theater in Chicago, and yeah, it was like, again, that whole first year was surreal, and then just like my friends who all grew up listening with me to the Shins being like, what's going on, man?
What is going on?
It was cool.
Yeah. You're lucky in that you've done a bunch of festival stops, but then you also do gigs like you're doing the 2 back-to-back sold-out shows at Hammerstein here in the city. Mm-hmm. Which do you prefer? I mean, of course you appreciate both, but how do you like both experiences?
I think it just depends on like the energy of the crowd. It was just kind of a canned answer, but I think most of the time I think in a indoor venue with your crowd, you're going to have a better experience just because people are, thinking maybe for a couple days or weeks ahead, getting ready for this show to see you, whereas a festival is sort of an experience of maybe 20, 30 acts they're going to see that weekend. So depending on when you catch them on a Sunday, they're like, it's the worst hangover of their life, and they're standing there in the sun. It's kind of it's a different experience, but sometimes you get the festival crowds that are just the best energy, and it's so much fun to be a part of that too.
And are you the type of band that'll bounce around, check out other acts at a festival?
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's harder than you'd think in terms of like loading in, and then you have to load your stuff off the stage so that whoever else can come on, and sometimes you're just in and out, but we always try to check it out.
I'm with you though, because people come on the show like, oh yeah, we love doing that before the gig or after the gig, whatever, and it's like, dude, how do you have time to like go and like be a fan? Like, it's impressive people can pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do, and it's awesome. Then you get to just be a fan and walk around and see. It's always great music, so.
Yeah. Rolling Stone called you guys the new folk rock heroes. What's it like when you hear stuff like that?
I don't know. I've never been thought of as a hero before, so I hope I don't let everyone down, I guess.
Well, we have some awesome fans here in attendance with questions, and we're going to get to the first question from the studio audience right over here.
Hi, my name is Kaylin. I was wondering if you had any cool stories about how one of your songs came to be, like a cool origin story. Yeah.
It's a good question. Yeah, so one, I guess, kind of funny story is the song on our record called Sado. We were just sitting recording another song, and Sado's the name, Sadie is the name of Sam's dog, and he calls her Sado Potato, and I was kind of just joking around with some chords from another song, and I made this sort of thing like Sado Potato ate a raw tomato, and we kept saying it over and over again until we sort of realized, like, maybe this is just a funny song. Sat down, and within, 2 minutes, we had the whole song worked out, and it's funny because we don't typically play the song live because I still think of it as, this joke, but people will come up to us and be like, I love Sado, why don't you play that song? And I'm like, it's a long story.
Awesome, great question. We have time for one final question. It'll come from back there.
Hi, I wanted to ask, what's the process of making the songs that you do, and if you have any, writer's blocks?
I would say the process is typically just myself or Sam working out whether it's a lyrical idea or a riff or something, and sitting together and trying to come up with a cool arrangement around the idea, or whether it's a narrative or whatever it is, just putting our heads together and trying to find a creative way to deliver that. And writer's block, definitely. I think sometimes it's pretty easy for me, at least personally, to know when it's just not happening. So I'll sit down with my guitar and start playing, and it's like the worst 30 seconds of music you've ever heard in your life, and I'm like, all right, let's go watch a Sixers game or something like that. So yeah, it definitely happens, but I just try to avoid it. When I don't have it, I just try to put it down and get away from it.
All right, well, we're unfortunately out of time here, but really quickly, you got the 2 shows here in New York City, and then what else are you looking forward to in 2019?
Yeah, just the rest of this tour with Rainbow Kitten Surprise, and then we have our own tour on the West Coast in March, and we're working on new music too, so that's really exciting for us.
That's awesome. Doing it while on the road, that's a tall task. But.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, we look forward to it. Guys, one more time, please, for Matt of Mountain Joy.